Yeah, I got one of these. What, you think I saw this and went, yeah, that looks like something, I'll wait to see how it turns out? The second this was announced and I saw it for the first time, I was on eBay and I was gladly forking out $70 for a mostly decade-old Voyager. And I know I'm not the only one to do that. I saw the mess that was the Kingdom version coming and I made the correct decision to dodge out of the way of that oncoming semi-truck of pain. Which, as you know from the Wednesdays video, I then intentionally dodged back in front of immediately. But yes, the Thrilling 30 Generations Rhinox was the correct decision and I'm proud of my brain for choosing to buy that. This is what the Kingdom Rhinox should have been. Also, just to be clear, this isn't going to be like a week of Rhinoxes or anything like that, just these two because I think it's important to contrast them. You know, when the Kingdom line was announced, I was practically begging them not to just re-release this with a few cosmetic upgrades and call it a day. And now, that's all I really wish this was, because this is so much better than that figure. Which is funny, because this actually suffers from most of the same problems as the Kingdom. It's not accurate, it poses bad in near identical ways as the Kingdom, transformation is still very panel heavy, the joints in the shoulders are a very similar type of nonsense, all mode has limited posability, for the time it wasn't very big for a Voyager, and it's just about exactly the same size as the new one, proportions were a bit off, the green plastic does not have the metallic sheen it needs, and I didn't manage to cover this in my review of the figure because I didn't quite realize how much of a problem this was going to be while writing the script, but this thing also falls over all the time due to a desperate lack of heels. And yet, this is just leagues better on the whole than the Kingdom figure. How's it doing that? Well, for starters, it's doing that by looking way better. Unlike the Kingdom Rhinox, which was supposed to be accurate, but either by deliberate decision or through pure incompetence, was altered to an extraordinary extent, while this is just out and out proud to be a stylized rendition of the character. And yet this is still far more faithful to his design. His feet are the correct shape, his shoulders are cylinders, his hands, while not big enough, are still trying to be as large as they can be, given the limitations of his transformation, and the Rhino hoodie is present even if it's not gold. And I can't even begin to stress to you how satisfying it is to have the Rhino jaw become the chest panel. Is it the accurate shape? No, but it's the accurate part. People often ask me why I care about faux forming so much, and I'll tell you it's because that when I see it, I just kinda die a little inside. It's so satisfying to have everything go where it belongs. No tricks, it just does what it looks like it does. Having a fake part so they don't have to cash the check the design wrote fills me with so much disappointment. So yeah, Rhinox's chest crest doesn't look 100% accurate, and I couldn't be more happy about that. Interestingly enough, this shares another bunch of design cues from the Kingdom figure, or more likely, that shares cues with this. Or probably even more likely, they are both referencing the original toy. Once again, this has the molars on the chest teeth for some reason, and with the teeth being smaller, my level of annoyance decreases in proportion with them, but this is also clearly running the same texture pattern with the two different types of ribbing. I will say one thing that does really bug me about this thing's design is the way the Rhino hood teeth kind of have this keyhole design. Another strange piece of similitude between the two is that this also has the strange chest panels on his ribs made out of the gut of the Rhino mode. I can't tell if this is just coincidence or intentional callback. Weirdly enough, I think the part of this that may be the most accurate to his show design are the hip skirts. They are just oddly on point compared to anything else on him. Oh, and look at that. You can see through his shoulders as well. These really are just brothers, aren't they? But that's all just accuracy. What about the look in general? Oh my god, this is so much better. It's better proportioned, making the figure look jacked and not just weird. It's better laid out. It has more kibble, and somehow that's a good thing. I didn't really mention this last time because the video was already so packed with the problems of the figure that I didn't have time to cover everything. But the back of the Kingdom figure is heinous. It's so full of gaps and holes, it looks lazy, and even though the backpack is actually smaller, it looks way bigger than the one on this figure. This thing actually bothers to have the Rhino parts collapse and make themselves look presentable. And like I said, there's actually more kibble here, and that's a good thing. The kibble is doing an admirable job of hiding all the stuff you're not actually supposed to see. What's more, this figure clearly had a better paint budget, and as a result, there are a great many more details picked out on this guy. Plus, the color layout in general is much stronger, with the figure being about less large swaths of individual colors, and more mostly beige with narrow bands of color to break it up. The chest is a feature on this figure, and not just a giant ugly gold black hole in its center distracting you with its blatant panel lines and obvious structural metal parts. The whole body of this thing is just tied together so much better, it doesn't look weird, it looks intentional. Everything about this feels so much more thought out and finished, like there was a clear vision for what stuff was and where it was supposed to go. Well, except for these parts. And it also feels like whoever designed this figure understood what elements of the design they needed to keep while they were stylizing the figure. So all the most important traits are here in as little a tainted manner as possible. It's not accurate to the show model, but it's accurate to the character. Speaking of that thing I just said, the head. This thing is very different from how he looked in the show, but it's still faithful to the details. The whole thing has been kind of run through the angry filter by making his features harsher. They've added a bunch of panel lining, and just about every feature is not quite the same. Difference with the Kingdom is, this actually looks really good and is still more accurate to the show. He has the beard. It's a little different, but it's the right beard. His mouth isn't wide enough, but it's very wide. The mohawk has like half the slats it's supposed to, but it's not like 1/10 of the slats it's supposed to. The head itself isn't quite the right shape, but it's close to the right shape. He doesn't have the horrible cup ears for no reason, and he even has the maximal symbols on the sides of his dome, though they are facing the wrong way. So yeah, everything about this head is subtly wrong, as opposed to the completely wrong of the Kingdom figure. His noggin is also about half the size of the Kingdom figure, making it much more proportional to his body, though sadly this is probably a little too small. But this head captures the spirit of the character. That head captured the spirit of an eldritch abomination that drives people insane purely by being ugly. Put these two side by side and it's not even fair. The Generations Rhinox manages to be more accurate while looking cooler, with a way nicer set of colors and more clear effort on display. Though he does have an even harder time standing than the Kingdom guy. This desperately needed some flip-out heels, and there's really no reason they didn't include those. As for accessories, this is, once again, kicking the shit out of the Kingdom figure. He comes with his two chain guns, and these are much larger, much cooler, much more complete versions of them, though they are entirely unpainted. It wouldn't really be a bother if they cast the blades out of some silver plastic, but instead these are just done in the tan of the rest of the figure. It's fine as is, but it could have popped way harder. Unlike the pancakes the Kingdom comes with, these are nicely filled out. They aren't just the skeletons of guns for no reason. They actually do look like they have the motor in them to wind the blades. These peg together in a much more clever way than the Kingdom, which just had these male and female pegs. These two, on the other hand, do so much like a Lego brick. And the best feature of these is that they actually spin, and really well at that, when you push down on these scopes, which, in a cool twist, are actually mounted high enough that if Rhinox were to use them, he'd be able to see over the blades. Now, Poseability is the one area this figure is going to fall flat on its face. It is the one area where this not only loses to the Kingdom figure, but gets the crap beat out of it, cause this thing was really bad even for the time. Head has a good amount up and a slightly above average amount down, but turning the head is restricted by these shoulder ribs. They won't stop you, but they do require the head to be chin up to turn, and yet this still feels less restricted than the Kingdom's head. Shoulders go up, and they actually do go further than the Kingdom figure while being at least slightly less ugly, but they are mounted in a weird place, so it's still suboptimal. No butterfly, but this is where we really start to get into how bad this figure can be. Elbows pull way less than a 90. This isn't just by a little, this is by a lot. Even back then, the standard of an elbow was at least 90, and this is falling spectacularly short. Unlike the Kingdom figure, which had borderline and no wrist articulation, this just flat out has no wrist articulation. This actually does have a waist, which I didn't think it did, but it's about as restricted as the Kingdom's. Pleasantly enough, the hips have way more freedom of movement, not getting hung up on anything, and getting out in all directions as far as it should be able to go. Knees pull even less of a 90 than the elbows do. Like, just damn, that's nothing. Feet actually do have a trait that was abnormal for the time in that it has a tilt. It's minuscule, but it's there. And the toes do have up and down, though it's still very hard to get this guy to remain standing. So yeah, this is a pretty serious thrashing it's getting on the posing front. This feels so stiff in the articulation, it's like it had a rod shoved up its ass. And I wish the joints were stiff like that because the legs are incredibly loose, though I don't find them to be the real issue getting him standing. But those problems are all washed away by just how much better this transformation is. Going from the Kingdom to this is like night and day. This is actually fun to do. It's fun, it's fast, and the legs don't make you want to punch yourself unconscious so you don't have to deal with them. It's amazing how similar the robot modes seem to be constructed, but the only part of the transformation they share is mostly how the arms work, and that the backpack pops up to cover the head. But at least it still has the decency for that to fold up better. So this is actually a really enjoyable process, but that could be just its juxtaposition with the Kingdom, as I think I remember people complaining about this transformation a while back. I would like to point out that it is mildly uncomfortable that his butt is soft. I really don't like that. And you are left with an even more realistic looking Rhino mode with even less kibble. I thought the whole point of Kingdom was to make accurate robot modes with realistic beast modes, and yet this is savagely beating the newer figure on both fronts. The arm kibble is a little more blatant here, but overall the look is much more impressive on this one, as it looks like a living, breathing animal and less like a plastic figure of one. It's got a soft rubber horn and ears, and the texture is stunningly lifelike. Poseability on this isn't great, and it's missing a few more joints than the Kingdom, but it's got more where it counts. Back legs can't kick forward at all, and they can't rotate in. Oh no. But they can kick back way further, which looks a lot better, if you ignore this gap at least. Front legs can actually get a little bit back this time, and much, much further forward, but they can't go out to the side, and great news! They can still rotate in. Head has no up or down this time, but the mouth can open up wide enough to be a literal nightmare. So yes, this does have fewer joints, but I'd say the improved range on them was worth the loss, as you can actually get some degree of realistic movement out of what's left. These two figures are obviously related in some weird ways. One is absolutely an evolution of the other. So why does it feel like it's evolving backwards? They share so many quirks in their designs, but go about acquiring them in such different ways, it's so strange. The only thing that could tip you off that the Kingdom figure is the newer one is the articulation, and even then, if you didn't know better, you could end up mistakenly thinking these are both older figures. In all other ways, the Thrilling 30 comes across as the upgrade. It looks better, it's more accurate, more effort was put into its final polish with much better accessories and a much better transformation and a much better alt mode. I sincerely believe that if I handed both these figures off to someone who's not a fan, they would almost universally assume the Generations figure was the newer one, and if they didn't assume that, then they'd be torn on which one was the newer one. But put all that aside, and the truth of the matter is, the Generations Rhinox is the more fun, better looking, less frustrating version of this character. And while the asking price for it is way too steep since the only way you can get one is through eBay now, this would be the rendition of Rhinox I'd say you want. But if you don't want to spend $70 or more on these, as you logically shouldn't, and you want to finish out your maximal team so you buy the Kingdom anyways, maybe just stick him at the back of the formation so he's not drawing attention to himself. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough of what I have to say. And I know you know what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.